All right. Thank you all so much for being here today. I hope I didn't bother you all too much with all my reminder emails. Just wanted to make sure that we had as much representation today as we possibly can as we go through version 3 of our model framework. So thank you again for being here today. Let me go ahead and share the presentation that we have today. And I will go into share mode. Let me know if you all are seeing my screen.
Yes, we can see it, Karen.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I'm going to give just a real quick update on the town halls, and then Jennifer is going to go through the framework 3.0. All right, are you guys hearing me? I had something saying I was muted.
You were muted briefly. I think we hear you again now. Thanks.
We hear you
Okay.
now.
Thank you. Okay, so as I was saying, I'm going to go through the town halls very briefly, and then Jennifer's going to go through framework 3.0. Dr. Fletcher is on with us, and we're going to have some open discussion about 3.0. And then we're going to be asking you for your feedback, what you think of everything that you're seeing. So that is it in a nutshell. So let's go ahead and get started with the town halls. So just to let you know, we had over 600 people attend our town halls in January and February. We had 9 regional town halls, and we were just super excited. They went really, really well, and I think that we had more people attend than we even hoped would attend. So it was really exciting. I think that the best thing was hearing all of the feedback that we were getting during the town halls, especially when it comes to the districts. All the districts that presented really did a fabulous job for us, and getting to see all of the different vibrant learning experiences that are going on across our state was just amazing. So if you didn't get a chance to go and see any of those, we did record all of them. They're out on our resource page. You can watch any of them. Yes, they are long. They all went a good 2 hours, but it was worth it. It was very much worth it. So we had at least 75% of those who attended were our educators. And then you can see here we had community members, business, some legislative or government, and family. Some chose not to respond when we asked who or which stakeholder group they were in. So we had about 14% that were unidentifiable, or a very, very small percent that identified as students or one of our partners. The other thing I wanted to just share with you are just the topics that were discussed. These were kind of the common themes or things that people were asking about. Obviously, I think it's the things that you would expect, the assessments, especially when it comes to understanding what's required and what's not required, what's going to be provided by KDE versus what would be on the local level. And then for local accountability, just the how. We got a lot of questions about how this is going to work and how will it be equitable. Vibrant learning experiences, I think we got a lot of wows over the vibrant learning experiences. As I said, that was where the districts really shined for us. And so just a lot of accolades around all of that. And then those other things that you see, social studies, science, student growth, these are all things that were discussed during the town hall, and people had various questions about them. We did put together a frequently asked questions document that is also listed out on the resource page. So all of those are available, and anybody that asked us questions, either we had questions on paper that they could submit to us at the end. We also had a QR code there where they could submit questions. All of those were answered individually through email and then also compiled as part of the frequently asked questions. So we made sure to get back with every single person that submitted any kind of question to us. Before I move on and let Jennifer take over, I just want to see if there's anything that Dr. Fletcher or Jennifer would like to add regarding the town halls.
I'll add, you know, our basic on each of our town halls, we went through a similar format. We started off with an introduction from the commissioner, and most of the time I stayed within my time frame. Not all the time, but most of the time I got the I did stay within the time frame allotted. They didn't have to give me too many red cards throughout those 9, so it went well. And then we also had people within the department, within the innovation group with Sarah Snipes and her group, who would talk about vibrant learning, you know, how things were, you know, what maybe a lot of people experienced when they went through school versus what type of activities we're seeing now in our Kentucky classrooms, and how just, you know, what those relevant, vibrant learning experiences could look like. And then and again, the next part, really the stars of the show were the ones that talked about the school, our district level local accountability models that are being worked on and developed as we went through. We had so many, and I hate to mention any of them because I don't want to miss any of them out, but one of my favorite slides, and outside of the pictures of the students and what they were doing, was the collaboration that's going on among districts and how they're working together. For example, Woodford County had a slide and it had emblems of or logos of different districts that they were working with. So you had Woodford was working with Clark County. They were working with Johnson County. They were working with Logan, Shelby, Rowan. And there's a long list of different districts that they were working with on their local accountability model. And to see that collaboration across the Commonwealth was something that was very, very special for me to see that as we went through and the work that was going on together. Because if you put pinpoints on a map, it's a wide range. It's a wide, a lot of geography covered there in how they were working together, develop local accountability models and get examples from each other and try to build better processes throughout. So again, the school districts that presented, if you're on here, thank you. First and foremost, thank you, because it was one of those things when you walked out, you felt great about where we were. Yeah, we still got work to do, and you know, as long as we're in this model, I'm sure that we'll look at how to refine this for many, many years. But with that being said, what's being done in the local accountability space was tremendous. I was really proud of that. I also like to thank Dr. Stafford. She would take the lead on talking about our model framework 2.0, and we would take, and then the next part, we started into wows and wonders. We were giving people the opportunity to say these were the things that they were thoroughly impressed with the model. Then what are some questions that they may have moving forward, or what would they like to see? So again, that was the basic outline of our town halls, and really enjoyed those. It was 9. The night that we went to Eddyville and back was a long night, but it was a very enjoyable night. So we really enjoy each of those as we went through. But again, thank you to our local districts that took a part in that in our presentations, and everybody at the KDE staff that did their best to give a picture of where we are now and where we'd like to go. Karen?
Thank you, Dr. Fletcher. All right, with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Jennifer.
Thank you, Karen, and thank you, Dr. Fletcher. I want to emphasize the incredible success of our town halls. I don't think that they could have gone any better. And we had several members of our Kentucky United We Learn Council to attend those town halls. So thank you so much for those who were able to come. And we realized these were of the evening and there were other things happening that could have impacted your attendance. But for those who were able to be there, thank you. And thank you to everyone that is part of the full council, because your discussions and your so thoughtful engagement in the discussion around our prototypes, our multiple prototypes that we went through in 2024 and developed, that led into the frameworks that now we are proud to present 3.0 to you. All of your engagements and your discussion have prepared us well for the discussions that we had at the town halls. Very few ideas or questions were posed that we hadn't been discussed in a KUWL council or a committee meeting or one of our virtual meetings. So we really appreciate your involvement and your engagement in those discussions. So as we move, Karen, to the next slide, we'll just note for you that 3.0 was developed in collaboration and from the input of the from the town halls. We, as has been mentioned, we had 9 town halls and had a tremendous participation, and the people who came were engaged in the sessions. They came to voice their opinions. They came to engage with the conversation, and we really gained some good perspectives from our participants from the town halls. We also met with the boards of directors at each of the education cooperatives. So those boards of directors at the ed co-ops are mainly made up of superintendents. So we had a lot of discussion at those board of directors meetings as well, and we've they provided some good feedback, perspective, and you'll see how that they have changed based on the feedback that we got from not only the town halls, but those board of directors. Karen, are you able to go to the next slide? I'm still seeing the common topics across the town halls.
Let me unshare and try to share again. Sorry about that. I don't know why this is causing so many issues.
And I can share if need be. So as Karen's bringing that up, we want to just reflect back on the main ideas that we've had as we've moved throughout the Kentucky United We Learn Council. Those big ideas are bringing together student perspective and having a student-centered framework and systems of assessment and accountability that really prioritize the student and their experiences. Our Kentucky United We Learn Council developed a vibrant learning experience definition, and we've seen examples and representations from our local districts of those different types of vibrant learning experiences and engagement with the students, where the students are prioritized in the systems. And so that's one of the goals of our Kentucky United We Learn framework, is to spread the experiences of vibrant learning to all students across the Commonwealth, so that they have opportunities and access to vibrant learning experiences. Another of the key ideas is to promote collaboration and within the districts and across the districts. So we want our districts to work together across districts so that they can help each other, be peers and support each other across the Commonwealth, because one district may have faced a challenge or obstacle and was able to overcome that. And so we want to bring together networks of districts and collaborate within their own community as well. So looking at the abilities to bring our districts' community voices together to create a sense of collaboration between the schools and the districts. In the members of their community, whether it be their business community, their faith community, their parents, students, across the community, bringing in different voices and where they can prioritize and collaborate together. And moving away from that color rating and moving again to more a collaboration. Developing local accountability systems that bring together and prioritize what is important to local districts. Moving away from a state-controlled system where there is only one accountability model, but there's actually multiple accountability models that are specific to each local district, so that they can create their own and what makes sense to them and their local community, as well as the priorities of that local community. So building up those local community priorities and reflecting and holding ourselves accountable for what is important to our local communities. And we heard multiple examples of what that could look like. We heard from one district that is looking at, in their local accountability system, looking at the percentage of students who are included in extracurricular or co-curricular activities. They have seen that students who are involved outside of school are more successful when they are in school. We have another school that's looking at prioritizing the social emotional supports for their students. And so there's a varying degree of ways of indicators that schools can look at and communities can prioritize. Whereas if it's just one system, it has to be a system that would be the same across. We'll have that with the federal piece, but we're talking about two distinct systems, one local and one federal system. And then the last piece
Jennifer?
there, yes. Do you want me
Sorry
to
to
share?
interrupt you, but yeah, it's just not
Okay.
working for me.
Okay, sure, I can do that. I
Sorry.
have a okay. Presentation mode. So then the last there is the feedback and support. And I talked about, again, that collaboration both within districts and across districts. So let me go back. Those are kind of the big themes of where we're going with the spreading vibrant learning experiences and the opportunities that students are having, collaborating across and within across districts and within districts, and then again bringing the local priorities and that collaboration with communities into our local accountability system. So what we heard from the town halls and the board of directors meeting, the difference between 2.0, which you've seen, and the new 3.0, which we are presenting here, is previously in 2.0, we had the interim assessment system that was mandatory, that all districts would utilize a state developed system. So it was required that reading and math, grades 3 through 10, that the schools would administer a state-developed interim assessment system, once in the fall, once in the spring, that would be aligned to a summative assessment in the spring. Actually, an interim in the fall and winter, and with an aligned summative assessment in the spring. That one topic right there got the most feedback across all of our boards of directors or the town halls. And even though we had a survey, that the results of the survey from the responders of the survey, there were 67% of the respondents that said, yes, I would be willing to move away from my locally purchased interim assessment system to a state-developed interim assessment system. We found very quickly that that was not the case at our town halls and our boards of directors. So in 3.0, districts will now have the option to administer a state-developed interim system, or they could independently purchase their reading and math interim assessment system. Now, what we heard is that our districts have purchased these interim assessment systems for many years. They've got data, they've got historical data on their students. They've got their processes in their schools developed around that data. They have their PLCs, their professional learning communities. They have those all integrated around their own interim data. So we made this an option. So the state, if we can secure the funding for an interim assessment system, would develop an interim system so that it would be adaptive, and our districts could opt into that interim system, that fall and that winter interim, and have data and utilize data instructionally. Now, that summative assessment in the spring would be required because that's going to meet our reading and math for our reporting federally. So that's a big difference that we heard from our town halls. And again, that's different between 2.0 and 3.0. The next, we just wanted to clarify that science at those off grades, 3, 4, 6, 7, and 9 is optional. Districts would be able to choose to opt into a state-developed test, or they could develop their own locally based, competency-based, more authentic demonstrations of learning. So we just wanted to clarify that. So we made sure that that language was there, especially in that technical document for 3.0. Then we also heard another add to the 3.0 from our boards of directors. It was a K2 assessment in reading and math in particular has been added. So this, again, it's an optional assessment that they could opt into a state-developed interim, or not interim, but screener at the younger age that would be age appropriate in reading and math. So again, it would be optional that the state could provide that. The districts could go ahead and continue because that is something that is mandatory in current state law, that there are screeners. And so they could continue to utilize their own or opt into a state-developed K2 screener. Then the last piece there for the framework 3.0 is the graphic has been updated. Now, if you'll recall, in the 2.0, there were kind of 3 pieces to the puzzle. One was about specifically federal, and then we had 2 that distinguished between the local, what was required, and what was like left to the local district. We've made the update to the graphic that there are just specifically 2 pieces, a local and a federal one. Revisions to the technical document that are not specifically in the framework is that the technical document was updated to align with those changes that I just mentioned there. It was also, there's a reference in the technical document to an exception for English learners. Now, as we have been working on 3.0, we've engaged with several legislators, and we have talked to specific legislators that are interested in changing how we test and hold accountable students for English language acquisition. So our English language learners and how they are tested and in accountability, we've been asked to look at some different ways on including our English language students. So that reference is in the technical document that we have been asked to look at the exceptions and which exceptions to utilize. So no really details on how we would do that, because those again have not been determined, and but a reference is in there because we wanted to be transparent in the fact that those conversations and that ask was made. And then the last thing in the technical document is some language has just been updated for clarity's sake so that it was possibly more understandable about what the details are within there. So just some technical language was refined. All right, so for the framework itself, the first page did not change. Had a lot of good feedback on the big ideas around vibrant learning experiences, prioritizing students within the two systems, promoting collaboration in local innovation, especially within assessments, and then that feedback. So there are no changes here to the framework on this first page. The second page is where we'll see that the changes that I mentioned. You'll notice here the graphic at the center, again, has the two pieces, one federal and one local. The right side for federal accountability indicators really has not changed. It's still, we have the same indicators that we had in 2.0 that have been streamlined and according to the Kentucky United We Learn, your feedback about making that a smaller footprint in lieu of more space for the local accountability systems. So you'll see here the federal accountability indicators for reading and math would remain the same, as would the transition readiness, graduation rate, English language progress, and climate and safety survey. So all of those remain the same. What is removed is the state assessment results for science, social studies, and writing. So that has been removed per our discussions within framework 1.0. From 1.0 to 2.0, you'll recall that our meeting for 1.0 had science still in the federal accountability system based on your feedback, as well as the local superintendent advisory council and the Kentucky Board of Education. Science has been removed as a federal indicator, but yet it's still there on that last bullet to be tested. And as you know, as a council, that science has to be tested and reported once per grade band. So that's there, that's that last bullet. Now, what has been reduced here in federal accountability is the elimination of those color ratings, as well as the change component that we currently have that is in our current system. And we've added the individual student growth at the elementary and middle school levels. So that was by far one of the pieces that we heard the most from the beginning, that people wanted that individual student growth. Now, looking at that left side, we've, instead of the two pieces, we've tried to be specific on what's has flexibility, and then what's required to be as part of the local accountability system. So you'll notice here that the flexibility in the administration and inclusion would be all of those vibrant learning experiences, those locally determined indicators, and how the or those districts would and communities would prioritize those local measures, bringing forward what they have and what they prioritize. The second one there is the interim assessments. And again, that's the flexibility we mentioned with either opting into the state developed interim system in reading and math, or continuing to purchase their own and administer their own. So that's that flexibility in that administration. And then finally, that off-grade testing, again, being able to opt into the state developed off-grade, or continuing with their own assessments within their local instruction, whether it's competency-based, whether it's more authentic learning demonstrations. The last piece there is the required options, and these have not changed from the 2.0 to 3.0, that the vibrant learning experiences would be a required component of the local accountability system. The options would be up to the district. Now, our Accelerating Innovation Standing Committee created a list of options, but that's not an exhaustive list. Districts could create their own and develop their own vibrant learning experiences that are relevant to those students in their local schools. The last two, the social studies and writing, again, are a required piece of local accountability system that would align to the instruction around those two content areas. Those two content areas are part of the core curriculum that all schools teach now. So including the assessments that are provided for in the schools, or the districts could opt into assessments around those social studies and writing, those content areas that the state develops. So again, providing flexibility in those two systems as well. And again, providing and aligning these experiences to the portrait of a learner are so critical, that we're preparing our students for a world that is unknown, that we can't even describe what it'll look like in 4 years or 20 years from now. So providing our students the opportunity to engage and engage with the content, to think critically, to collaborate, to communicate around all of those critical skills around those portrait of a learner. And so aligning those activities to that portrait of a learner is important to foster that again, that student-centered experiences. And then the last page of the framework is the same as it was. We still have to meet districts where they are. We've heard from many districts that Commissioner Fletcher mentioned that presented during our town halls, and they have been engaged with this vibrant learning, developing their own portraits of a learner and their own local accountability systems. We've heard from L3 districts and local labs of learning districts and other districts outside the local labs of learning that are engaged in this work, but not all schools and districts are. So we have to meet them where they are and along the progress. So we'll start with a pilot phase in helping develop the district's ability and their skills and their capacity for this type of work, and then expanding that and then sustaining that across. So again, that piece of the framework has not changed. So let me pause here, and because I want to give it back to Karen for discussions, or Dr. Fletcher, would you like to add anything to what I've covered?
The only thing I would add is we did talk a little bit with the SCAC, our School Curriculum Assessment and Accountability Group, and they had some input. There was a lot of discussion about Portrait of a Learner from one of the members of SCAC, which was really good. But also too, we had some members of SCAC that felt like science should absolutely be back into the model for the accountability for the federal piece. Now, again, most of the input that we've had has been what we have here with 3.0, but I did want to make you aware that we did have some of our district assessment coordinators that really felt like science should be a part of that overall. But other than that, I think we've had some great discussions so far. Just interested to see what our people here at the United We Learn Council has to say.
All right, and with that, if you have a question, go ahead and raise your hand. There are a couple in the chat, so I'll go ahead and share those now. From Susan Farmer, I've been getting the most questions from people about the timeline for how this would be rolled out. Is that something we'll be discussing today?
I think that third page of the document, it doesn't really give timeline as far as the number of, like, this is not something that we can snap our fingers if this goes as is in 2026, and it'd be ready to go in the fall. So it would be an onboarding process. I'd hate to tie actually timeline to that. We could as a group if we wanted to. And the reason being is so many districts are at so many different levels. We have some districts that probably by the fall of 2026 would have a local accountability model ready to go and ready to be put out there for their own purpose. And then, of course, the federal piece we would hope to be ready by 2026, fall of 2026 as we move forward. Of course, that means an RFP process, but we don't have a specific timeline. Jennifer, is there anything that maybe I missed there?
Sure, I can add to let me share this. You've seen this before. This is our journey to the moon. And right now, we are in this phase here with the council recommends, we're in this fall, this winter, the council and KDE recommend to the Kentucky Board of Education. So we're moving into what we're calling the advocacy phase. You can see here that we're moving toward advocating for what we have as a final framework, and I don't even say final framework, because we are going to move into an advocacy for certain components to advance our educational system. Now, we'll move forward with what comes out of the council. This meeting will move forward with what comes out of LSAC, and then the Kentucky Board of Education meeting next week. So we'll move into this advocacy phase next throughout the summer of 2025. And then we'll get to the General Assembly literally this time next year. So in the 2026 legislative session, we will have proposals or sample statutes, bills that could be considered by the General Assembly. What they do with that then will be up to them. So we're going to move into an advocacy phase to communicate to the General Assembly what has come out of the years that we've worked as a council, the town halls that we have heard from many members of the Commonwealth. And we can literally say thousands of people have been involved in this movement, in this initiative. So we're going to take that into the conversations with our General Assembly. So we're going to have legislation for consideration in the 2026 legislative session. Now, it will be up to them on what aspects get included, and then eventually would be codified into law. So we're talking about legislation for consideration in 2026. If they so choose then to support it, parts of it, and put it into law, then we're looking at a time frame that we would have to pilot some things. We would have to write some RFPs, things like that. So we're talking about a future system of assessment and a future system of accountability. So a couple years down the road, at least.
Okay, Betty Edwards has her hand up.
I should have been prepared and had that mic off. I have a couple of just a couple of comments and questions. And the one that went earlier in the chat about if you're going to use that PowerPoint again under the optional assessments, I would change that, because I think what you're talking about is optional assessment formats, not that the assessments are optional. So I'd want to make sure that that's clear if you're going to use that again. On the 3-page document, and I should have said this before if I didn't, under standardization, that second bullet where it says instruction developed around testing offers a little variance. Well, unless things have changed since when I was in the classroom or an administrator or worked the department, test instruction was not around testing, it was around standards. So it stands like you were using, it was test-based instruction. So that is uncomfortable for me. So that if you can consider not, unless that's what happened after I left the department. But earlier I know we weren't encouraging instruction. Instruction happened at the district and classroom level, not around what the tests were, but around the standards. So that comment. And then under, I still have a concern. I see nothing in these documents about equity across the districts. There's a lot about district-based, community-based. I still have concern that there is equity from district to district to district. Doesn't mean the format's the same. That means every student has that opportunity. And I don't see one word referencing equity in any place in here. You did mention on that one slide that equity had come up, but I see no reference to it in these documents, and that concerns me greatly. The other thing, it may just be a wording thing on the local assessment, federal accountability indicators, the second page. With what's happening in Frankfurt, I'm not sure I'd use federal accountability. I think I'd use state accountability, unless you're suggesting there wouldn't be state accountability. If things happen like they say, then that will be changed, and I wouldn't start something new knowing that it was going to have to be revised or that it wasn't clear. So I personally see no problem with saying state accountability indicators instead of federal. I think you'll be safer. Doesn't mean you might not change those down the road, but the way this reads is if something happens, if it does happen and everything goes to the state, and these are federal accountability indicators, it says there are no state accountability indicators. Not what you intend, but that's the way it could be interpreted. Those are my comments.
Thank you, Betty.
Okay, we've got some comments in the chat. Travis is asking if we are now going to be assessing 3 through 10 for writing and social studies.
I think one of the things that we heard from a lot of our social studies teachers that showed up, they were like, how do we make sure that we that social studies is being viewed, we're having the assessment, and the big concern was making sure it was taught 3 through 10. Now, Travis's point here is we were asking that this would be a part of the local accountability through 3 through 10. And then there has been some discussions as far as, do we do that on grade bands similar to what we do with science? So Travis, what's your input? What are your thoughts on that? What would you like to see in this point, if you don't mind my asking?
Yeah, I think what I would like to see is accountability for a grade span, and let districts make those decisions about. I mean, in a true performance-based or competence-based model, I think you're going to be assessing at every grade level. But I think, to me, it makes sense for us to be looking at that just like we do science in those grade spans.
Okay, thank you for that, Travis. Okay. And that has been some discussion here. We've kind of gone back and forth on. So thank you for that.
Okay. Jessica made a comment. As a science teacher, I also 100% agree with science being pushed to federal. I know it got slipped back because of the school climate piece, which is also very important. We then have a question from Brandy Howard. What processes and guardrails will ensure consistent quality across local accountability systems?
Let's go back to Jessica just for a second. Jessica, and again, to go back to, we talked with LSAC, we talked with our board, when I say our board, Kentucky Board of Education, the KUWL Council. One of the things that we've talked about is how much of a focus are we looking at science by pulling it out and having it reported by itself? So does that up the if you will accountability? Does that make put a bigger spotlight on it? Anything you'd like to add? Again, this is something, so far this is where we are about having the science treated separately. Is there anything you'd like to add to that, Jessica, at all?
Hi, sorry, I'm actually at school pickup for my daughter.
Oh, okay.
But so as of right now, like the science assessment piece, because now we've bumped it over to local accountability, right? So is that meaning that the districts are going to be able to make that choice of what the science assessment will look like, and it not be like all across the board the same exact thing? Is that what we're looking at for the in-between grades?
Oh, for the in-between grades, I would say yes, that we are assessing it at the grade bands, because right now we are required to give a science assessment that is standardized across the state, and then report that also. So that's what we're doing as far as that federal accountability requirement, is to report that separately. So we would leave it up to how the local districts would want to do that in the off grade bands. I think I saw Travis. Did you have your hand up?
I did. I guess, to the point of science, it brings me back to a question related to, I think, one of the last, I can't remember, prototype, I believe, where we had the launch pad and we saw a path to some pretty significant changes to the assessment in the future, right? So it was like almost casting a vision into the future about what assessment could look like. This current framework seems to not really cast any real vision for me beyond where it currently sets, right? I mean, here it is. Well, let me make an exception to that. Within the local systems, right? Lots of room for visioning and innovation. But doesn't say, I mean, like in that second, or that whatever prototype it was, we talked about even the federal waivers that we would pursue, and to the point raised earlier, which is a point I raised with someone today, who knows what the federal system will look like. It may not be a federal required system. So it allows us to really think differently about assessment in our state if we wanted to really push the envelope on there. I'm trying to bring this to a concise point here, which is I was on a ILC call the other day where Massachusetts was presenting their innovative assessments that they are currently working on. And I was really impressed with what they had done with performance assessment. I mean, it was really pretty cool. They've started with a small group of districts. They're scaling it next year, which I think they said the following year would be a statewide implementation for accountability purposes. And it did appear to be just in the area of science, which is really, I just want to raise again, it is a huge opportunity to really pilot performance assessment in the area of science to those that are wanting to see it in an accountability system, you know, a statewide accountability system. To me, that makes the most sense, which is what was really encouraging to me when in that second prototype where we're really promoting that. And I guess my thinking here is I don't feel like we've batted it around enough. I mean, I guess for my flavor, it never really came up as a question that we pursued in the KUWL Council outside of the surveys themselves. But anyway, that's just my 2 cents on that. I love that thinking about really we're in a system. I don't want it to be another static system that feels like we are 3 or 4 years from now trying to reinvent it again versus a thinking around continuous improvement cycles. All innovation that's successful has these cycles of continuous improvement, right? And how are we going to facilitate that with a vision still of what's to come, to go back to the moonshot? So that's my comments. Thank you for allowing me to say those. Thanks.
To add to what Travis was saying, I think that that's where we have that sandlot, if you will, within the local accountability space. I mean, it just makes perfect sense that we would have some competence or some performance-based assessments, really, as it wraps around science. So if we can grow that in the local accountability sandlot, if you will, and then maybe expand that as we move forward, I think that has some tremendous possibility. Again, I think that if we have some models, maybe even do some research in what Massachusetts is doing, that how do we make that look as we move forward? So I think if we really want to dig into the next generation science, I think that's our next steps as we move forward, Travis. So some good points there, especially as it comes to science. Now, and I think too, we have a lot of space there for how districts want to assess social studies. Now, I do have a resolution that was given to me that we may have to look at a little bit more, that came from the General Assembly on working with the Secretary of State on civics and social studies education. So I just received that last week, so I'll have to see what that impact that may have for our local accountability. But I do have some resolution that was just on my desk. I think it was maybe it's either Monday morning or Friday afternoon. But again, I think we need that sandlot area of the local accountability space. I think is a great place to start, and then how do we expand that moving forward? I think it's a great vision, Travis, as we move forward to get to that point.
All right, I'm going to.
Brandy, Brandy's question there. Brandy, we've started talking a little bit with Fleming County. And also, too, there's in Karen Dodd's office, Leslie McKinney, we're starting looking at some rubrics that would be around the nature of what would be some quality processes, things of that nature that we would definitely, before we do anything like that, we'd bring it back to the KUWL Council. But in order to have that consistent quality across local accountability systems, you know, what does that rubric look like? So we have started working a little bit. Fleming County is doing a lot of work as it relates to these rubrics to see what quality, not necessarily saying this is a valid local accountability system or a correct or incorrect local accountability system, but more along the lines of what type of processes went into that. So there are some preliminary discussions about that as far as guardrails. But again, our guardrail right now would be in the local accountability. There has to be vibrant learning. There has to be social studies and writing as we move forward. Those are things that are part of that. Now, as far as we develop these rubrics and have something more to talk about with our KUWL Council, I think that's very exciting work too. So Brian Creasman and the folks there in Fleming County are working on some rubrics to help out. They're trying to piloting that work. But also too, what does that look like as far as from Karen's office with some of the things that we're looking at as moving forward. But we're very preliminary in these stages as we move forward. And that would also, we would try to look at, we would include also guardrails for equity. You know, what does equity look like across all districts? What should it look like? So those are some discussions, again, very early on in this future assessment accountability system. That's where we are with that. Jennifer, anything you'd like to add?
Yes, and I think that as we move forward into the next phase of the KUWL Council, that could be an area that you help us with, developing some of those resources and providing where those guardrails should be. So yes, we've had some preliminary discussions, and we're looking forward to you helping us with that.
Mm-hmm.
Annie has her hand up.
Danny?
Hi, I was just wondering, when you look at developing processes, how can the KUWL Council assist with meeting districts where they are so that we can grow our system and bring more people on board and create maybe a synergistic approach as we move forward?
And I think that's where we're looking to you as a council to help develop those. Maybe develop some modules, some rubrics, maybe some resources and guidelines, some best practices. So I think that as we turn to the advocacy phase, now that we know that local accountability is going to be a central focus of what's moving forward, we're going to start developing those types of those exciting resources.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Yes,
We
we
can
can.
hear you
Yes.
now.
Appreciate it. Thanks. Sorry, I'm in a hotel lobby with headphones. I want to go back to the guardrails for a second, the interim assessment. I think my biggest question or concern is when you have, and you're right, you know, a lot of these districts have been doing MAP or whatever it is they've been doing for years. My question is, when we talk about guardrails and we talk about whether or not it's working, is there something, and this is a discussion we'll have, how do we know whether what they're choosing is effective? Is it working, right? Okay, it's assessing, but is it assessing and giving us what we need? And is it a true depiction of what's going on in the district? So what does that mean? Does it mean that when we talk about a rubric or we talk about guardrails, you know, 3 years from now, let's look at that and look at your data and see if it's doing what it says. Let's talk about equity. Let's talk about all of these groups. Does it do what it's supposed to do for every single child? So you may have superintendents may be happy with the same one that they've been using for 25 years, but is it effective? Right? Because we like things that are comfortable. We may not want to change. So that's my bigger concern with that. It's an equity issue. It's an efficacy issue. It's academic success. It's all of those things. So we give them the ability to choose, but at what point do we say, yeah, you chose that, but that's just not working?
I think a good point there, if we're looking at primarily like their interim assessments, you know, the standardized, that last summative assessment is going to be the same for everyone. So no matter what a district selects, if they select MAP, iReady, or whatever we offer, we have that comparison of what we select as the summative. So if their interim assessments are not getting them the same type of data results that they're getting in the summative, then there still has to be, how do we handle those districts that are not meeting all their subpopulations and their subgroups and, you know, the low socioeconomic student or any other student that they're not reaching, because we still have that standardized summative assessment. Now, when you go back to the local accountability part, I think that's where the rubrics are going to be so key in making sure that we reach because we want every student to have vibrant learning. We want to make sure that all students, so how exactly, what's going to be in those guardrails as we move forward to ensure that every single student has that vibrant learning opportunity. So yes, that summative is going to help us, that reading and math test at the end for the summative assessments is going to help us to check their interim assessments. But I think it's going to be very important for us to look at these guardrails and these rubrics on how do we make sure that every student on the local accountability piece is getting that same vibrant learning experience that no matter what their economic background or what their whatever issues that they may have or barriers that they may have. So I think those rubrics are going to play a key piece in that.
Edna, you had a question about paragraph 3 of the technical document. Was that answered, or do you want to come on and ask for a more detailed question on that one?
I think I understand it, but I think that the last sentence could be a little bit ambiguous. You might need to make it clear that the local assessments could be used in the off years in the technical. Am I understanding that correctly? And then state assessments used in the mandatory years? Or can local use their own for all years?
So are you on the last page there?
I am on the technical document, page 3. Science.
Okay, so districts have the option to assess science as they so choose in grades 3, 4, 6, 7, and 9.
Right.
Okay,
That's
so
what I
they
thought.
can, yes. But then in grades 5, 8, and 10, those are the common assessments that everyone will take and be reported on. So, okay, so the districts may include science performance in their local accountability for all grades if they so choose.
Right.
And they're encouraged to develop and administer their own competency-based or authentic learning measure for science, or they can use the state provided in grades 3 through 10.
So they can do their own for all years.
For all years, but that would be in addition to in 5, 8, and 10, that mandatory one that must be common.
Okay, so I found it might just be my reading of it, but it seemed a little ambiguous to me.
Okay, all right, thank you for that feedback.
Yeah, thanks.
I'm seeing some questions in here about civics. Let's see, Betty or Edna, do you have anything else you want to add on civics?
I just think it's critical that we teach civics, and I think that there needs to be some assessment and accountability. I think it has been evident that a lot of people do not understand our Constitution or their roles and their responsibilities, and in this democracy, that has to be something that has to happen. And I'm concerned about that.
Yes, me too. And I just wanted to offer that there's Civic Lex is a nonprofit, and they work on local municipal government ideas, but they work with the schools to develop that civic education for high schoolers and maybe even other students. But anyway, they're just a resource that I think if we go that path, they could be real helpful.
Susan, you have your hand up.
Yes, I just have a language question. In the technical document, when we use competency-based assessments, do we mean performance-based assessments? Just for clarity, there's some technical definitions of those that competency-based could be under the umbrella of performance-based, but they're not exactly equal. So just for clarity, that might just make a comment about maybe we look into which to use and which one we mean when we use that. And there are multiple definitions of those too. So I just wanted to bring that up.
And I would look to you and to UK Next Gen for those definitions and that.
All right. Well, we can advise on that.
Much appreciated. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just add to some of Susan's comments. I've been thinking about this, looking at page 2 of the the model, I know that my understanding or the way I interpret some of the local requirements around vibrant learning experiences, I think the intent is to certainly get those competencies, those durable skills developed through those VLEs. But are we really, my question is, are we really laying the groundwork for that being a condition through a required local accountability piece? I know that districts are going to have a lot of flexibility and autonomy to incorporate their portraits of a learner competencies within like local accountability systems they choose to develop and implement. But does the required vibrant learning experiences indicator at the local level, does that fully get us to that competency-based skills in addition to the academics and the academic performance? So I think that's something I've asked myself a couple of times after looking at the current model. Because, I think when we think about this new system, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, back to somebody's earlier point, we shouldn't have to go back and redesign a new system that continues to push on that. We really need to really articulate it in a way, I think, that when you're thinking about local systems of accountability, we have to make sure that we're attending to the development of those competencies, regardless of what your local options look like. How are we holding ourselves to that standard when it comes to knowing it's happening in addition to vibrant learning?
Thanks, Delaney. All right, let's see. Penny asked, can we get some clarity on what options are wanted where EL learners are concerned?
Sure. Just briefly, I can mention that there are a couple of exceptions in the current Every Student Succeeds Act. The first exception that we are under now is the exception 1, where our English learners are exempt the first year from testing and accountability, other than participation. They have to take, just a minimal amount of multiple choice and constructed response just for participation, but no accountability. There's another exception that we've been asked to look at that would change that, where our newly arrived English learners would test in the first year that they are here in a Kentucky public school, and that would set a baseline for their performance. And then that would be the first year. They would not go into accountability, but the second year they test, then it would go into growth because the baseline would have been set the first year. So growth in the second year, and then the third year, the students would be in growth as well as status. So we've been asked to look at possibly more discussions with the legislators and see the ramification or the unintended consequences that second exception would have.
Tons of unintended consequences.
Thank you, Penny.
Go ahead, James.
I was guilty of not knowing how to unmute myself.
I could tell.
This is just wondering, and I was an add-on member. I'm a replacement member. I was on the outside looking in, but one of the things I remember early on was the question was being asked, can we design a system of accountability that improves the learning experience for students? And I heard that a lot early on. And my question is this: as we iterate and we so now we're on 3.0, are we anchoring back to that original question. I think it's easy to create a new accountability system. It's really hard to create an accountability system that changes the student experience. And so my question would be, could there be some time before we iterate again, set aside maybe to anchor back to that and make sure that we're really thinking about the student experience. I'm not saying we aren't. I'm just not hearing it. So that's it.
I hear you, James.
James, do you have some suggestions on that, on where we're maybe that we're missing it in this? Do you have any suggestions there?
I probably have more questions than I have answers, but I'm very willing to be a part of a conversation about that, and I'll certainly, start jotting some things down. I'm glad to, if it'll be of any help. I don't want to muddy the waters, but that's where my mind.
I don't know, maybe even a place for the rubrics. We've talked a lot about growth, and it's not just in reading and mathematics, but how does the local accountability system promote growth and in the students, not only in the students and the experience, but also too, where did they start having baselines, especially when you look at your profile of a learner, those competencies at different grade levels, and then how does a student grow, but also too, how to make sure that, if we have we will have the vibrant learning requirements. What does that look like to say that we're actually changing the student experience? So it might be somewhere where we're talking about that more in the rubrics. Maybe.
I think the more we can centralize and prioritize the local accountability when we're talking about the health of a community or a school, the more likelihood we have of impacting the student experience in a positive way. And the more we talk about traditional testing measures, the greater the likelihood of changing the student experience goes down. And so as I got involved early, what excited me most was that I felt like we were really putting local accountability on a pedestal. And and I think that would be my question. Are we going to be able to present it to the legislature in such a way that they see that, and frankly, the definition of vibrant learning that we have, that we have an accountability system that takes us towards those joyful learning experiences and honoring and celebrating and measuring those. So I've probably said too much, but I'm glad to keep thinking about it. And if there's more conversation, I'm glad to be a part of it.
Penny, you have a comment? Question?
Sorry, I don't know why it's so complicated. So James, I don't know you, but you're dead on. Early on, this was student-centered. And the problem with doing this whole thing, which is dirty and ugly and messy, is the required parts that you have to include and the voices that you have to include, right? So we have the superintendents who have needs, and we have the legislators who determine that these things are more important than other things. But you are absolutely correct. And Dr. Fletcher, I don't think it's as complicated as putting it in the rubric. It needs to go back in some of the verbiage when we talk to people in our elevator speeches, in these presentations, that this is student-centered, and we are here to alter a child's trajectory with that moonshot. So that falls on us as a council to be able to bring it back to that, center it back, make it back that north. And we can do that just in how we communicate with each other and how we talk to the superintendents and the legislators. I don't think it's that difficult. I think we need to recommit to that, and that's on us to do that.
I think Penny, I think you bring up a really good point, James, too, because I've spent all week in the All In for Ag Week, and that's how I've talked to everyone. That's been my conversation. How do we change the student experience so that everything is relevant? That it is, when I talk about vibrant learning and it's being relevant for the students, but then how do we make sure that in all of our conversations and in our documents that we go back and focus in on that? Because I think, well, I know even if you're in the town halls, that was the focus of the town halls. That was whenever the districts were talking, that was the focus. That was the highlight of our town halls, was how are we changing the student experience? So I guess the question is, how do we go back to make sure that our one pager or our three pager goes back and really focuses on changing the student experience? So I think that's a good point, because again, every one of our town halls, all of our schools that were mentioned here earlier, their focus was how do we change the student experience, and how do we get that back into our document to communicate that it's not. And I think you're right. When we start looking at the required parts and the verbiage there around the required parts, it seems like that we're kind of, in what we're putting down on paper, we're really focused on trying to meet the requirements. But when we're talking to people, I can say this with full authority and a full awareness of what's going on in our districts, is when we talk about vibrant learning, we're talking about changing the student experience. So how do we communicate that? So it's a great point on everybody's part. James, also too, Penny, and Travis also, but and everybody else. I think we had some other comments in there, is making sure that we are changing the student experience. Good point.
Okay, I think we've gotten through the chat, but if I missed someone, or if you made a comment that I didn't highlight and you would like it highlighted, go ahead and raise your hand. Don't want to miss anyone.
Karen, if you don't mind, is there some way we can save the chat for our purposes? If you
Yeah,
don't
this is
mind?
in
Okay,
Teams,
good.
so we still have it. Mhm.
Great.
Carmen. Can't hear you, Carmen. But you don't look muted. I'm going to come back to you, Carmen. Maybe something in your settings. Susan Farmer, do you want to come on and speak to your comment?
I'm not sure if my sound is working. I'm kind of I was trying to step out of a noisier spot, so I'm not sure how well this is
I
working.
hear you.
I think there's still some need for clarifying what's meant with the difference between optional, which I'm now understanding you mean optional formats, versus mandatory assessments. And then when you talked about the mandatory assessments, that they had to be common, but like clarifying what those common assessments are. Those common within a district or common across everyone in the state would take the same assessment? Like, and then is it still local? Like, I'm just really kind of confused with some of that language, just to make sure that we are all on the same page. I think Susan Lyons had mentioned something about that it could be helpful to clarify that. And I think the more I'm kind of hearing some of those questions raised, I think it would be helpful to hear some definitions across what it means by that.
So I think that you're referencing in the technical document on page 3 outlines the indicators used in accountability that fall into the local. And there are options for local choice, and several that again are required. When you look at the framework itself, I can share again the framework here. You can see that on the left-hand side, there the top piece, which was in 2.0, it was one puzzle piece, and then the bottom one was a separate puzzle piece. So those two areas, the flexibility in administration and inclusion, and the required with options, are both part of that local accountability system.
Thanks, Jennifer. Let's see, Jessica commented that, can I just stress that we know tests are not an appropriate form of assessment for our kiddos, yet we have sort of really tripled the amount of testing we are doing. We can assess every year, 3 times a year, that's fine, but why do we keep going back to tests?
So these pieces are for the interim assessments. They're already being administered in the local districts for generally their fall, winter, and spring. I think the flexibility here in the flexibility in administration is that the state would develop a comprehensive system that the districts could use in lieu of purchasing their own. So that it's just, since that is in something that districts are already doing as part of their instruction and getting information back to inform instruction around individual students, the state is offering to develop a system that is aligned to the Kentucky academic standards that would look, have that alignment to the summative assessment in the spring. So, and then with the, so that, I think that's the flexibility, is that we could develop that as a whole state based on the Kentucky academic standards, or the districts could continue doing what they're doing.
All right, is there anyone else who has something to bring forward or anything I missed in the chat? And as Dr. Fletcher said, we will have access to all of these comments. I see a lot in here about the technical document. So Jennifer will have access to all of this for any changes that need to be made to that. Any other comments before we move on past the open discussion? Okay. Oh, Travis, go ahead.
I always have to look for that unmute button. So I guess I want to quote someone that's on the call, and I won't say it nearly as eloquently as she did many years ago. But, you know, we talk about assessment. The design of the assessment matters. The design of the assessment matters, whether that's for state accountability, federal accountability, whatever it is, that will drive, intentionally, unintentionally, the learning experiences for kids. And I think that is something that we just have to keep asking ourselves, right? Is that what we're doing? To someone's point that made about, you know, continually talking about testing, is that, right, meaningful, and is it useful for learners, which was our moonshot, that it's useful for the learner, and meaningful and useful for the learner. So I just think that we have to continue to be asking that question, the moonshot: is this meeting the desired outcome that we wanted from all of this work? And thank you for, again, allowing me to speak.
Thanks, Travis. All right. Last call. Jennifer, can you go on to the next? Oh,
It's just,
here's
I just
somebody.
put something in the, I just put something in the comment that you guys can read later. It's Rhea Eisenberg, but it's just, I had just heard some feedback that just from some of my teacher and principal friends that it seems like a lot more work on, you know, that it's going to overburden, but I have just told them to just sort of trust the system and that it's supposed to show what we're doing well and allow students to, you know, find their niche, so to speak, and to shine in their strengths. So I'm putting faith in the system that is our moonshot will actually shine through as we roll this out and start to implement it.
Thank you, Rhea. All right, on your screen, we have a questionnaire that we'd like each of you to go into. I'm going to put it in the chat as well. So you can either click on the link in the chat or you can use your phone to access the QR code. You might be able to click on that. I don't know if our Teams works that way or not. So that's why I'm putting it in the chat as well. But I'm going to walk through this because we really want each of you to do this right now. This isn't something that I want to send out afterwards. We want to get your feedback right here and now. So if you'll click on either the link or the QR code, the first few questions are asking you about the journey. So how we got to this point. And remember that we talked about a lot about the 4 innovative habits. And so question 1, pardon me, question 1 is about inclusion and asking you to, the definition of inclusion being to define, is defined as bringing in diverse voices and building a sense of belonging. And so that very first question is just asking, to what extent do you feel all stakeholders were invited, heard, and given equitable space to contribute? You'll see that we've got a Likert scale down there for small extent to completely. The next question is about empathy, which we define as understanding the views, feelings, and needs of others. Co-creation is defined as working together to create and/or implement a solution to a challenge. Reciprocity is defined as changing or sharing power or privileges for mutual benefit. We had 2 questions around reciprocity. One is, to what extent do you feel contributions from the council members and stakeholders were visibly recognized and integrated into Framework 3.0? And then the second part of that is, to what extent do you feel meetings created a 2-way exchange where participants not only provided feedback, but also gained knowledge, support, or resources from the process? Once you answer those questions, it's going to take you to the next page of the questionnaire where we ask, what level of support do you have for Framework 3.0 moving into the advocacy phase? So here we're looking at number 1, you either support advancing Framework 3.0 into the advocacy phase as presented, or support advancing Framework 3.0 into the advocacy phase with a specific revision. If you click on that one, it'll take you to another page where you can put in what revision you want to see in the framework. Or the third option is, I cannot support advancing 3.0 into the advocacy phase because, and if you click on that one, again, it's going to ask you for your reason. And then we will move, it moves on to, the last one is the KUWL Council, your KUWL Council experience. Share with us your experience with the KUWL Council, including the steps taken toward the moonshot. And I see we've got several responses in there. I think we have about 19 people on this call from the KUWL Council. So I'm looking to get 19 responses in here, and we're up to 3 right now. And so far, all of our responses are showing that you all feel that we have honored those innovative habits well. So that's encouraging. And I've got Gretchen. I don't know if you're in that with me or not. I gave Gretchen permission to be able to see the responses as well as they're coming in, so she can help me facilitate this part of the conversation.
Yep, I'm here. I have it up.
Great. We're up to 6 responses.
Yeah, I thought we'd wait till we get most of the group before we put it up there.
Yep. We're at 7, 8, and if anyone's having trouble getting into it, please let me know right away. Everyone should have access to it. We've got 15 responses so far. We'll give a couple more, 16. All right, I see 19 in there. There may be more than 19 that joined. When I last counted how many people accepted our invitation, it was 19 KUWL Council members, and that's how many responses we have right now. So I think we can go ahead and talk about some of these. So again, when it comes to inclusion, we had, am I reading this correctly? Okay, we had 17 of our 19 that either agreed or strongly agreed with our statement. Around empathy, we have, again, 17 that agreed with that statement. And we're up to 21 responses now. We have 15 that strongly or agreed or strongly agreed that we had co-creation in the way that we expressed. Reciprocity, 16. for the first question. Again, that first question was around, to what extent do you feel contributions from council members and stakeholders were visibly recognized and integrated into the framework? So we had 17 out of the 22 now that gave that strong remarks. The other part of reciprocity, to what extent do you feel creating meetings created two-way exchange? And we have 18 out of the 22 that supported that statement. All right, getting down to the framework, and please do keep your responses going. If you're still typing in some responses, we'll continue this questionnaire will remain open. So for I support advancing framework 3.0 into the advocacy phase. We have 31% who chose this option. That's 7 of our 22. The majority of you chose I support advancing framework 3.0 into the advocacy phase with a specific revision. So 59% or 13 of you chose that response. And then we have 2 or 9% who said they cannot support advancing the framework. Jennifer, Dr. Fletcher, how would you like to move forward? Do you want? There's a lot of text in here. I can see where folks, what was written in here.
I think that we've captured a lot of these in the chat over here, so this is good for us to have.
Yeah, and Gretchen's sharing it on screen. Thank you, Gretchen.
Yep. I hope I'm scrolling appropriately, guys. I'm trying to move at a pace you can read.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody holler if it's too faster. Oh, it hopped up when another was submitted. So this is a little bit. This is the one I was getting to before.
Okay.
It's the bottom of that. Here's the comments from I cannot support. Moving down. It's another one where we have a lot of responses. Hang on, let me get it on the page first. Oh, sorry, guys. When someone new submits, it does a little jumpy thing. That's about where we were. That's it, Karen.
Yeah. Well, thank you all for taking the time to do that. That's really going to help us inform what we do with this framework moving forward. We have one more slide. Jennifer, can you share that again? It's really just about our next steps. So next week, we will be sharing the framework with the LSAC, so the Local Superintendent Advisory Council. We also will be sharing with the Kentucky Board of Education next week. We do plan to have a summer convening, and right now, I'm not sure if Susan sent that out to everybody, but go ahead and put on your calendars, if it's not already, the June 20th meeting. This will be a one-day convening where we'll be talking about the advocacy phase. And as you heard, as we've been talking here today, we're trying to come up with the right work streams for moving forward. You as current members are welcome to continue on into the advocacy phase. We also want to recognize if you feel like you've done your job and you're ready to move on, we want to honor that as well. We have heard from several people in the field as we've been out doing town halls. We've asked if folks would like to become more involved in the next phase, and we've had quite a few who have submitted their names. So we do intend to reach out to them and ask them to participate as soon as we figure out exactly what those work streams will be. As Dr. Fletcher said, one may be looking at rubrics and coming up with the right rubric for those local accountability pieces. We're also looking at that crosswalk between the old model and the new model, which some of you have put in the chat as well. So we have a couple other ideas. Once we figure that out, we will get that out to all of you, hopefully before the June convening, so you can have an idea of where we're headed after the June convening. We're also going to be presenting the framework to legislators. That won't be until next year, but we have certainly, Dr. Fletcher especially, has been in a lot of conversation with a lot of legislators around all of this. So I think the awareness is getting out there. That is all that we have for today. Dr. Fletcher, any final comments from you or any final questions that anyone wants to ask?
No, I'll close with this if it's okay. First of all, thank you to each person that's part of this. The hard part is listening to so many that may have a passionate view that is in one area, but then a very passionate view that's in a different area, and then trying to find a common ground that's beneficial to our students. At the end of the day, what's beneficial to our students? And again, I'm very appreciative of bringing it back to, are we changing the student experience? Because everyone that we talk to, that again, if you listen to me talking about vibrant learning and experiences, how are we changing the student experience? I think Travis brings up some great points about how can we really redo science in the future, as a performance-based assessment. There's a lot of potential as we move forward, I think, here. Now, with that being said, making sure that every single student has the opportunity, not only the opportunity, but participates in vibrant learning. We want to make sure that our students, if school looks the same 3 years from now, we've done something wrong. Just being open about that. If it looks the same, or if it even if it resembles what we've done in the past, then this work is not exactly what we want it to accomplish. I will say, from being in different districts across the Commonwealth, I think I've been in approaching somewhere between 40 and 50 districts, somewhere between 80 and 90 schools. The student experience now is so much different than the student experience that I had a few years ago. But again, this work with accountability and trying to balance that, we want to make sure things happen, but on the other hand too, how do we make sure that we're just not adding another assessment? as opposed to changing the student experience. With that being said, I will also announce this group. We are looking at advocacy as we move forward. We're also looking at what do these rubrics look like to make sure that local accountability is what it should be. And then also, too, Kentucky has been asked as one of 6 states to participate in a national forum on reimagining the high school experience. So we are very thankful to be a part of that. And we're talking about how do we want to include the KUWL Council moving forward. So again, you know, as far as if we, you know, at this point where we are now, if people want to continue, we'd be love to have everyone here, but also looking to about adding some more members as we move forward to have that input from people in the field each and every day. So from the commissioner, thank you. And honestly, there's been some things that along the way that has changed my mind. You know, if you would have asked me what accountability would look like in July 1 versus now, I think I would have given you a different picture in July 1. But listening to each person and seeing how that changes the student experience has made such an impact on me, and it gives me different perspectives. So again, from the commissioner, as a dad, as a former superintendent, as a former teacher, and also a former administrator, thank you for that. We'll continue to move forward with this group, and I'm looking forward to when we get back together on June 20th. So with that being said, thank you so much, and really appreciate the work.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you all.